Andrew Kunas here one more time for the Shaun of Dirt podcast, and we're here at the Chili Bowl and at the booth for the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame and Museum in Iowa, Knoxville, Iowa there, and I am with the director of the Hall of Fame, Bob Baker, and Bob, you and I, we've met a few times now since I joined the committee here, and how long have you been involved with the Hall of Fame now?
Well, Andrew, thank you for having us on the show today here at the Chili Bowl. I started at the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame and Museum in 2008, so this is my 17th year, and I would say it's gone so fast I don't even know how to describe it. You know, we started with one building, and now we're working on our sixth building, a new suite tower, the Dennis Albaugh Suite Tower, right next to our museum. So it's been a very rewarding thing for me, being a lifelong race fan and a lifelong fan of Knoxville Raceway as a youngster, getting to drive up from Kansas City to watch the races on weekends. So it's just been great.
And thank you for inviting me to join the voting committee a few years ago. Real privilege to be part of that. We just announced the other week our 2025 inductees. Tell us about them here, if you can remember all 8 of them off the top of your head here.
Well, here we go. Off the top of my head, I can remember Damian Gardner first because he's a good friend and he'd been on the ballots for a while. So Damian's going to be inducted along with Craig Delansky, a very popular sprint car driver from across the Midwest, but he did race with the World of Outlaws, so he raced across the country. And then also Todd Schaefer, a Pennsylvania driver, is going to be inducted. So those are the 3 drivers we have. For mechanics, we have Davey Brown Jr. and Don Ott. Don Ott, of course, the famous engine builder from back east. For our officials, media members, we have Steve Sinclair, who Steve wears a lot of hats, and a lot of people will probably not recognize his name, but he is one of the head people at K&K Insurance. He's the owner, operator, and president of the IRA Sprint Cars, the independent 410 Sprint Car Series. He's also the behind-the-scenes man at the Knoxville Nationals and the Chili Bowl in the past, who has been on the race savers with the radios to help them line up after a yellow. So he directs the cars on how to line up, to restart the race. And then our last inductee is Kenny Greitz. A lot of people might not be familiar with Kenny Greitz, but Kenny won the 1969 Knoxville Nationals. This is before roll cages, when roll cages were just starting to come into play. And some of the teams had put on a bolt-on roll cage onto the race car to protect the driver in case the car rolls over. Well, Kenny was one of those guys. Came in 1969, a long story, and won the Knoxville Nationals. But a few weeks later, he went to race in an IMCA race over in Nebraska. And IMCA was not sold on the roll cages. They said, Kenny, you're going to have to take that off your car if you want to race here. And he said, but it doesn't make my car go faster. It's a safety feature on the car in case it turns over so I don't get hurt. They said, we don't care. They're not in the rules. You need to take it off. So unfortunately, that's the same race weekend that Kenny lost his life when the car turned over without the roll cage. So the next year, the roll cages were optional in IMCA racing. And so Kenny is probably the person most responsible for bringing the cages onto the sprint cars to make them a safety feature on the cars. Originally, as I said, they were a bolt-on to the chassis, and then they became manufactured as part of the chassis as they are today.
We have a World of Outlaws official, and also, didn't we? Was it Carlton?
Yeah. Yes, Carlton Reimers. How can I forget Carlton Reimers? Longtime competition director for the World of Outlaws. Ted Johnson's son-in-law has been with the Outlaws long before the current World Racing Group as the World of Outlaws, but Carlton has been there from almost the beginning. Back in I think it was 1990, about that year he started, and it's just been a solid figure with the World of Outlaws to keep everybody together. If you can imagine traveling with all these guys up and down the highway to 90-plus races a year to all the different racetracks and states they visit, and you can just imagine what frame of mind all these owners, mechanics, race car drivers' minds in. Carlton's the one that keeps everything under control, keeps the show moving from upstairs, knows all the drivers, and can smooth things over at the end of the night. So he's been a great asset, not just to the World of Outlaws, but also to our sport. He's been somebody that's a guiding hand with the safety committee. As we mentioned before on the roll cages, Carlton has been there, from the beginning with the safety committee to help institute things in sprint car racing to help keep the drivers and the fans safer.
You mentioned Steve Sinclair. I met him shortly after I joined the committee. He was at Warp there, and I learned that he's the guy who makes the IRA sprint cars go. But he'd been involved with that organization for over 30 years. But he's basically been the guy who's made sprint car racing in Wisconsin go and all the other stuff on the side that he done in the sprint car racing business there. So maybe to me there, I don't know about you there, but it seems like it was surprising it took Steve this long to get into the Hall of Fame.
Well, Steve had been on our final ballot for about 4 or 5 years. He's very deserving, and being inducted into the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame is a Lifetime Achievement Award. And while a lot of the fans are not familiar with these people, like Steve Sinclair or Carlton Reimers or Kenny Greitz, they're people that made a lifetime contribution to the sport that got us where we are today in sprint car racing, and they're all extremely deserving. I don't vote on who goes into the Hall of Fame. I'm the person that gets to count all the votes and make sure that all the rules and regulations are carried out fairly. But we have a national induction committee, of which you're a part of, and it's a 2-step process where you get a nomination ballot. The highest vote getters on the nomination ballot make the final ballot, and those are the people who eventually get inducted into the Hall of Fame. And it takes a while. You just don't mention somebody's name and everybody says they're a great guy and they get inducted. Our Hall of Fame, the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, is the second hardest Hall of Fame to be inducted into in the sports industry. We are members of what they call the International Sports Heritage Association, which is Hall of Fames for sports all across the world. And according to them, the Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, and our National Sprint Car Hall of Fame are 2 of the hardest Hall of Fames to get into. So being inducted into the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame really is an honor, and it is not easy because Steve Sinclair has been so deserving for so long, and we're just very happy he's going to be inducted this year.
You mentioned the nomination process here. I learned a lot of stuff here from all the bios that you sent out with the nomination form. You emailed them out, and it's, I want to say right around 100 bios that were submitted here. So that's the first step. They're not required, but it's a huge help here because not everyone knows who everyone is in racing here. So if a person out there, a friend or family member, has someone they believe should be considered for the Hall of Fame here, all they got to do is send a bio to the Hall of Fame to start with here. What's the process?
Well, the easiest thing to start with is to go to our website at SprintCar HOF. That's short for Hall of Fame, sprintcarhof.com, and just look up where it says policies and procedures, and then you hit a link that takes you right to how to write a letter of recommendation for someone for the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. You can click on that, but to make it easy, we need a one-page, one side of one sheet of paper of the accomplishments and contributions of the individual being recommended. Send it to me before Labor Day, Bob Baker with the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. I will make copies and get these out to everybody on our National Induction Committee. And this is a way for the general public, as you said, to get people's names in front of the National Induction Committee that the public thinks maybe the committee isn't aware of or maybe has forgotten. So it's a great way to get more names in front of the National Induction Committee like yourself. And also I'd like to thank you for being on our National Induction Committee and taking the time to sort through those bios, make good nomination votes, and then also final votes on our final ballot. If it wasn't for our National Induction Committee, we wouldn't really have very much of a Hall of Fame. They really make the nominations happen. This year, it's May 31st, Saturday, will be our 35th annual National Sprint Car Hall of Fame induction banquet. So we'd like to invite everybody to Knoxville. If you're a race fan, we'll have the USAC sprint cars racing with the Knoxville regulars on both Friday and Saturday night. And then, of course, our big induction banquet Saturday afternoon right there on the fairgrounds at Dyer Hudson Hall.
I went to the induction ceremony in 2023 and watched the USAC sprint cars and the local 410s there, best of both worlds from the Hall of Fame. That's another cool thing about the Sprint Car Hall of Fame. You can watch the races from the Hall of Fame there behind Turn 2 on race night.
Yeah, when our Hall of Fame was built, the museum was built. It was built with suites on top of the museum so people could view the races from our location in Turn 2 at Knoxville Raceway. And that really has been one of the saving graces because, as probably everybody that's listening knows, museums don't make a lot of money. They're nonprofit businesses for a reason because they don't make money. If it wasn't for the suites on top of the museum, the Corvette sweepstakes and the sprint car sweepstakes that we do, there'd be no way that we could keep our doors open year-round, 7 days a week for people to come in and learn more about sprint car racing.
And you mentioned all those bios there. I read every single one of them there, and it's helpful there. I learned so much stuff about, especially on the promoter and official side of things, and the pre-1970 category there. I learned so much of that helped me make informed decisions on who I wanted to nominate there, and there were some tough choices to make there. So yeah, send those bios in. I told some people there that hey, well, how come so-and-so's not in? Well, I never saw anything about them here. So send those bios in. They're not required, but it's a big help here. But, yeah, Bob, it's an absolutely amazing atmosphere, even at a local show at Knoxville, and to take in the Hall of Fame. But you're also here. You have a booth here at the Chili Bowl every year. You have your auction on Thursday during the day there in the Turn 4 grandstand. But just tell us what you think of just the atmosphere at the Chili Bowl every year.
Well, I might not be the right person to ask because I was at the very first Chili Bowl when it very first started, and there was probably about 30 or 40 cars here at the most, and it was a big money loser for Emmett Hahn and Lanny Edwards, the two promoters, co-promoters of the event, and they really had to have a hard decision after that first Chili Bowl if they were going to continue racing, and they said, well, we think it's probably a pretty good idea, but we lost some money. Let's try one more year and see what happens. Well, they did it for the second year and had a few more cars and a few more people, and they said, well, we made a little money, but it costs a lot to rent the building, and so let's try it one more year. And so here we are, about 40 years later, and we're at the Chili Bowl with 388 race cars and 6 nights of racing. And it's just a great atmosphere because this time of year there's not a lot of racing to go to in the middle of January. So here we are with about 15 to 20,000 race fans a night for 6 nights. A great trade show back behind the pit area. All the race cars, teams, and drivers just walking around talking to people like it's old time home week, So it's a lot of fun.
All right. And aside from the Knoxville Nationals there, would you say, as far as taking a weekend in Knoxville, would you say the induction ceremony weekend there at the end of May would be the best time to go check out a show at Knoxville and see the Hall of Fame?
That's a great weekend to come. We'd love to have people for that. But honestly, any weekend from the middle of April through the middle of August, every Saturday night we have great racing. People can't believe this, but it's an all sprint car program. We have 3 classes of wing sprint cars, the 410 sprint cars, the 360 sprint cars, and then the Pace Pro Sprints, basically a crate engine type where they're all the same engines, entry level for people to get in to sprint car racing. So it's really nice to be able to see 15 to 20 sprint car races in one night and a well-run show that usually ends at about 10:30 or 11 o'clock. And it's a lot of fun. So the weekly shows, if you're driving across the country, you're on vacation, you're going to visit a relative, you're going to a race somewhere else, stop in on a Knoxville Raceway, see the museum on a Saturday night, again, for the middle of April through the middle of August. Best sprint car racing in the world every Saturday.
And having seen the USAC weekend in local 410s there on a Saturday night 2 seasons ago and seeing the Hall of Fame in person there, I can vouch for that. Incredible experience here. If you ever get the chance, go to Knoxville Raceway and go see the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. And Bob, thanks for all you do, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us, Andrew. And again, everybody is welcome. Sprint car racing, our museum, it wouldn't be what it is without everybody's contribution and help. So we encourage people to visit us anytime. We are open 7 days a week, year-round. We usually have about 30 to 35 race cars on display, a movie theater on the second floor, and of course you can see that Knoxville Raceway out those big panoramic windows on our second floor.
That sounds like a lot of fun there. That was Bob Baker for the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame and Museum, and this is Andrew Kunas for Sean the Dirt.